guys, so today I'm doing another book to movie comparison, this time for Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. And I know I have to apologize because it's so late. I told you guys in my TBR that I was going to do it this month, and in my defense, it is Sunday, June 30th right now, so if I get this video edited, it might almost be in time for June. So apologies for it being late, but here it is. Before we get started, I have a confession to make. I usually love movie adaptations of books. I love to see what new things the screenwriters do with the story to freshen it up. I usually give movies a lot of leeway when they're doing adaptations of books because I understand that there are a lot of things in the books that are just, they can't portray them in the movie because of the vastly different mediums. Having said that, this movie was an epic fail. I think their first and biggest mistake was adding in this law that Zeus made forbidding contact between the gods and their children. Now, on the surface, this seems almost inconsequential. It's just a tiny minor shift that they made to the movie to make it a little different. But when you take that thread and you follow it through the events of all 5 books, they totally screwed up the plot. The whole reason Luke and all the demigods he gets to join him throw in with Kronos is because they are angry at their parents for abandoning them, and they want to make them pay for ignoring their children. But now there's this command from Zeus that Hermes and everybody can't exactly ignore, and all their kids know it. By making this one change to the story, they're undermining a crucial human element, not to mention, like, the entire goal and purpose of our main antagonist. Well, main other than Kronos, but you see what I mean. By the end, Luke is going to look like nothing more than a petulant, rebellious teen, not the hurt son ignored by his father and acting out in anger, and perhaps even justified anger, because they've given an upfront reason for this ignorance. On the flip side of the coin, Hermes is going to wind up looking just like a misunderstood father, which, I mean, in the series he was to a point, but at least in the series there was still this illusion that he had in fact abandoned Luke. But again, by throwing in this law that Zeus had forbidden contact between them, that gives them a viable excuse. I mean, in Hermes' mind, with the movie the way it's set up, he's done nothing wrong. There was nothing he could do about that, because if he broke Zeus's law, there would be, well, probably quite literally hell to pay. And Luke would probably understand this because he knows how the gods work. Instead of the story eventually boiling down to the gods having to face the consequences of their actions and actually cleaning their own children, which they had neglected to that point, you know, character development, it's going to turn out looking like Zeus is nothing more than a big bully who broke apart a bunch of families. I also feel like this was just a complicated way to avoid mentioning the pact between the big 3 about never having children with mortals again, because that was never mentioned. The only thing that Chiron said was that it was rare for the big 3 to have any children, not that they tend to cause world wars or the destruction of the universe. So yeah, that's my first big issue with this movie. One of the things I cannot forgive was the complete absence of blue food. I mean, really? It's kind of a focal thing throughout the story, kind of one of those things that keeps Percy sane through all of this craziness. And I understand why they didn't want to introduce it into the film, because that would have been a lot of explanation for something that might be considered a moot point to people who hadn't read the book. But couldn't they have just thrown something blue in there, like for the fans, for the people who would appreciate it, like an inside joke? When Percy goes to his apartment, he pours himself a glass of lemonade, and both times that I watched this movie, I thought, why can't it be blue? Do you know how many extra bonus points they would have scored from me? I still wouldn't have enjoyed the movie, but at least I would have appreciated the effort. The clicky pen. Okay, I remember when the trailers first came out for this movie, how that was a bone of contention for most of the fans. Now, at first, it actually kind of amused me. I thought it was an interesting little, more modern twist that the scriptwriters come up with. But I got to thinking about it, and I poked a little hole into their clever idea. The cap on the pen acts as a sheath, so Percy can turn his sword back into a pen. So let me ask you, how do you resheath a clicky? Where are the 3 old ladies who knit the socks of death? This was one of my favorite moments in this book, not to mention one of my favorite chapter titles of all time. And yeah, I understand that it's kind of a smaller moment in the series, but still, it's awesome. It kind of just sums up Rick Riordan's entire legacy. He's taken these ancient Greek writings and made them new and exciting again with a humorous and modern twist. It basically sums up everything that Rick Riordan is to his fans. I think the main reason this didn't feel like a real Percy Jackson adventure was because they took out the mist. Anytime they encounter mythical monsters, it's only with the focal characters. There are no innocent bystanders or random citizens that they have to rescue or who are freaking out over these weird things that are happening. With the exception of the maid spotting Medusa's head through the motel window, they weren't involved, and you have to admit, that was probably the greatest moment in the entire movie. And no, if you're thinking it, the Lotus Hotel does not count because all of those people were completely oblivious and there were no mythical monsters. I think this was the second fatal flaw in this movie because it really limited the wow factor. Okay, my next issue is the whole Pearl sideline. It just doesn't work. I mean, in theory it should. The pearls really are the way that they escape Hades in the book. Here, the pearls were supposedly a gift from Persephone to several of her visitors, which doesn't exactly hold up when you realize that one was found at Annie M's Emporium. We'll ignore that for now. We can just say that she got it off of one of her victims. And the museum, because of course Athena's crown hundreds of feet off the ground is the most logical place to hide a pearl for a would-be suitor. But at least the last one was, oh, yeah, that's right, in the Lotus Hotel. So either Persephone's guys have really bad luck, or she really didn't want her visitors coming. But then, Luke was the one who sent them on the Pearl Quest in the first place, so maybe it was all some big elaborate trap on their way to do exactly what he wanted them to do? And then the shield gets broken, and everyone sees the lightning bolt, and Annabeth says, Luke has betrayed us all. Say what? Annabeth spends the entire series, defending Luke's actions and hoping that he will change his mind and come back to the good side, and he's not really as bad as everyone thinks he is. She's always holding out hope that he will change his mind or she can bring him back. She's had a huge crush on him since she was 7, and Percy discovers firsthand several times just how emotionally wound up she gets when someone so much as even mentions Luke as the bad guy. Also in the underworld, I was very disappointed when Percy opted to save his mother instead of Grover. I mean, they tried to write it in so it was okay by Grover saying it was his duty because he was their protector and, oh yeah, that's right, completely incapacitating Hades so there was no danger. But that's what annoyed me so much. This was a lesson in self-sacrifice for Percy. He was faced with an impossible decision, and he had to learn that sometimes, to do the right thing, you have to give up someone or something that you love. It's his first encounter with his fatal flaw, and by removing that choice and even that danger, they effectively cut his character development in half. And of course it makes perfect sense to charge toward Olympus with someone who can't even get in! On that note, how did Sally Jackson even know how to get to Olympus? I felt that a lot of characters were inaccurately portrayed or even intentionally altered to play to an older crowd, like Persephone. I mean, what was up with her? They do realize that these are kids' books, right? I'm assuming that the reason Sally Jackson didn't actually turn Gabe and his poker buddies into a statue was because they decided that wouldn't be quite kid-friendly for the movie. But they could get away with Persephone's alterations. Other characters suffered from character merge malady, like Hades, who seemed to take on a lot of the characteristics, if not the role of Ares. But the worst was Annabeth. She was completely out of character, not the least of which was her willing acceptance of Luke's betrayal. I think a lot of this had to do with the initial warrior woman scene in which she's introduced. This is the trait that takes root in the film, not the architect-loving brainiac who dubs Percy Seaweed Brain. Seaweed Brain wasn't even mentioned. She came very close to oohing over architecture once. And if there had been a little more oomph behind it, I might have even believed it. The only one out of character I didn't mind was Grover, and I think this is because he had no ties whatsoever to his book counterpart. They completely redid him. He had none of the characteristics of the Grover in the series, and I think that's probably why I didn't mind so much, because he was entertaining, and he also wasn't trying to be a character that he wasn't. I know there are probably many more flaws in this movie, but those are the ones that really jumped out at me. As for neglecting to introduce Kronos, I can forgive that, because they were trying to start a new franchise. They probably wanted to see how Lightning Thief would do before they opened up this can of worms full of unanswered questions, and they didn't want to leave a whole bunch of loose ends if Lightning Thief didn't take off well enough that they couldn't do the second movie. What I can't forgive is the gross misrepresentation of so many characters. In just an hour and a half, they managed to void the eventual development of so many gods and demigods alike. Now, having said all that, let me tell you why I'm holding out hope for Sea of Monsters. First off, Stanley Tucci and Nathan Fillion. I love those guys. I mean, who doesn't? When I first found out that they were going to be in the movie as Mr. D and Hermes, that was what first got me intrigued, because I had completely lost hope and interest in any of the other Percy Jackson movies that would come after that. I honestly didn't think they were even going to pursue the franchise, and I wasn't going to have any interest to see them, but when I found out Stanley Tucci and Nathan Fillion were going to be in it, I was a little intrigued. I was intrigued enough to watch the trailer when it came out, and I have to tell you, after watching it, I am cautiously optimistic. For you die-hard fans, I know that you were giddy because Annabeth is finally a blonde. Congratulations. Your protests have changed the world. In the trailer, we see the Princess Andromeda, the Oracle, the Chariot of Damnation, Hippocampi, and the attack on the camp. Really? I was sold at the Chariot of Damnation. I mean, this was the three old ladies knit the socks of death moment for this book for me. So the fact that they actually included that, oh, it makes me so happy. Another stress reliever is the addition of Clarice. I know she's a focal point of this plot, so they really had to include her. I'm hoping that her appearance finally is going to ease the pressure on Annabeth's, multi-personality disorder, and that she will start acting more like Annabeth, the daughter of the goddess of wisdom, who overthinks things and calls Percy seaweed brain and loves architecture. With the addition of Tyson, wearing normal human clothes, no less, I'm hoping that they will also explain the mist, which will probably benefit the movie as a whole, just so that we can start seeing some more interesting encounters in the general public. I'm not sure how they're going to fix that big gaping plot hole that is the law Zeus established to forbid gods from contacting their mortal children, but aren't you just giddy that Nathan Fillion is going to be Hermes? I mean, he's such a fun, awesome guy, and he's got the lovable soft side too. I am so excited to see him in this role. He's going to be awesome, I just know it. Oh, I can't wait for Hermes and Luke moments. By comparing the trailers for both movies side by side, you can see they're trying hard to make the adaptation truer to the book. I really hope it pays off, because even after being disappointed by The Lightning Thief, I have to admit I'm really excited to see this movie. So those are my opinions on The Lightning Thief and the upcoming movie Sea of Monsters. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and like and subscribe or comment, because I really love feedback from people. I love the interaction. So if you have any suggestions for more videos for me to do, I will try my best to get on top of it. You can find me on Tumblr, Facebook, or Twitter. All of the links are in the description below, because that's where they belong, and it's totally handy to have them there. And I will see you through the computer screen later.